Michael, can you speak louder for some of the folk what your question was?
Okay.
Michael's not used to not being able to be heard.
I was only observing that if I were a member of a discernment team, the question that I would want to make sure was adequately answered is the question, if the presbytery decides not to dismiss, then how many people leave? You see? You might have had a congregation of 1,000 and 600 came to a meeting and 400 of them said, we're unhappy with the Presbyterian Church, we're ready to go. But if you decided not to dismiss, would those 400 people really go, or would they work out an accommodation to remain with their church with their friends? So that's a judgment call it seems to be the discernment team needs to work on.
Okay. I remember the comment I wanted to make was somebody was when we were talking about sessions, responsibilities and all. I know of at least 3 churches in the presbytery who've looked at this and said a conversation regarding dismissal would split this church in 2. We're not even going to have the conversation. They opted to just say, we know what would happen and we don't want to go there. So they've taken that.
It's apparent that until the various congregations know what the price of dismissal is, they really can't make a valid decision. In the minds of one, 3% is great. That's a gracious dismissal. In the eyes of another, 30%. So, there's quite a disparity that could develop here. And frankly, how can anyone be in a position to know where we're going?
One more variable. Just a second, I've got one here and then we'll come up.
In the example you gave about the church that didn't leave because they, I don't know who they is, had decided it would take a majority of members to leave, but they still had 3,000 people who voted to leave. Who gets to decide if that vote is majority of members, majority of those present? What person, does each church get to decide?
It's the session. Session gets to set the rules. Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
Jim?
There's I think a lack of understanding. Maybe I've got the wrong understanding. My understanding of where we are is we went through a process, had a straw vote. We chose to enter discernment. No decision has been made yet. Now 2 teams, one from the congregation, one from the presbytery, are going to come together after they've gone through a training. The presbytery team has gone through a training. Certain data is being provided on the basis of our policy, at which time then there's going to be meetings between the presbytery's team and the congregation's team to review that data, to formulate a basis of what the basis would be for a dismissal proposal to the presbytery. Both parties will then, or at that point, the congregation will conduct a final vote, notwithstanding their straw vote months ago, on the basis of that negotiated proposal for dismissal, and that will be the proposal that will come forward to the presbytery for approval. That's my understanding of the process.
That's 90%.
Okay, what am I missing?
What you're missing is that that will, from the start, that will be true for 2 congregations. 2 congregations have made very clear that they want to enter a discernment process with the presbytery.
Right.
All right? The other 9 have made very clear that they are seeking dismissal. So it'll be, there's going to skipping a step for those that are seeking dismissal. It's going straight to conversations regarding the data, what do we know about the church, what are the hard facts, And is there a minority within the church that needs to have their voice heard? What are we dealing with here? Are there other extenuating circumstances? And Tom knows I've alerted them, there's at least one church that has very extenuating circumstances that they're not going to be happy to discover. Okay? So when they get into the process, you never know what's going to happen. Don? And then
Are you aware of any presbyteries that have said no?
on dismissal?
Yeah.
Not at present. Now, I say that. The rules of the game changed dramatically last early spring with the Permanent Judicial Commission decision of Lee versus San Francisco, in which the Permanent Judicial Commission spelled out very, very clearly what held in trust means. And therefore, every presbytery is back to the drawing board. There are no, quote, gracious separation policies in force today. They've all been thrown out by that decision. So it's a new ball game as of that decision. Okay, because we now know presbyteries who do not go through what we're going to be going through will have those decisions reversed very quickly, and in some states, specifically California among them, where it's very clear what property trust clause means. Okay, you have to remember in California, folks, it's very clear presbytery has title to the property ultimately. That's already been decided by the California State Supreme Court. It's clear as a bell. That's one we're not even on the table for discussion or argument.
Is that considered comparable to the St. James Anglican?
That's exactly what it is. It's the St. James decision, which spelled out for hierarchical denominations who have a trust clause in their constitution, the property is held in trust for the sake of the denomination.
They're still going to appeal.
Pardon?
And they're still going to appeal that.
St. James is?
Yes.
Okay, well, they probably will. It's whether the Supreme Court will hear it or not. I would love for it to get resolved, but
Let me go back one more step. For the 9 who sought dismissal in our description of the process, they still got to go take that final vote after their negotiating team and the Presbyterian negotiating team have resolved the basis for submittal of a proposal. to the
That's correct.
Presbytery. So that's the one thing they still have to do. At that time, a minority of any kind could be identified, and then the Presbytery, the 2 teams have to resolve. Is that enough?
hopefully it's dissolved or it's there
Resolved at that
resolved
point,
long
yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
It goes back to Howard's point is that until you know what is going to be recommended to the presbytery, the congregation as a whole is not in a position to decide whether we want to seek dismissal. I mean, if the thing is, it's going to cost us $10 million to get dismissal, I'm not sure I want to seek dismissal at that point. I don't know if I want it that badly. We're going to have to come up with that kind of money. I'd just soon go over out and start a new church somewhere. We don't know until you get there. By the same token, oh, okay, it's going to cost us $100,000. That's no big deal. We've got 3 or 4 people who can write checks and cover that real quickly. We don't know.
But at the same time, the issue for dismissal, in my opinion, should never be on the basis of money. It should be on the basis of theology.
Well, that's I'm just saying in a congregation of 500 people voting, a certain percentage of them will vote on the basis of theology, and a certain number of them will vote on the basis of their checkbooks. Realities. Yeah.
I would hope that discernment teams would not take on face value a letter requesting dismissal and assume that that represents true discernment. That Again, my earlier comment about, starting with the answer and then building the justification, that a true evaluation of whether or not discernment had taken place.
Did you hear that, Forrest?
I think so. Why don't you say it again just to be sure?
Forrest is going to be working very closely with the discernment teams, so I want to make sure he hears these kinds of comments.
I just got outed in this room also.
Sorry about that. Since you are the stated clerk, you're entitled to be outed.
Typical Presbyterian, sitting in the back,
I was distracted for it, so it's really my fault. All right, give it to me once more just to make sure.
What I said was that I hope that once discernment teams are formed, they will not accept on face value a letter requesting dismissal as evidence that true discernment had in fact taken place, and satisfy at least themselves, and hopefully satisfy everyone else, that it was not a case of starting with the answer and then figuring out the question.
Mr. Convener, if I may.
You may.
The answer is not only I hope so too, but to the extent that it's been interpreted to me in these first 3 weeks, the response would be that that is the intention of the team that drafted the policy, that approach is within the policy that this body approved in June, and it is the intention, as I know it face-to-face from the team that's planning the training times for the joint discernment teams, that aspect of things will be communicated as a necessary step. The aspect of discerning the presence of real discernment will in fact be part of the work of the joint discernment teams. Is that a response to the point?
Yes,
Okay.
and one of the reasons I bring this up is that there was a statement made at the meeting, I think it was at Orange, where we hashed out the agreement. The statement was made that, yes, if you want to start at step 13 and submit your letter of dismissal, that constitutes discernment.
Response coordinating team of COM, and you are in very, very capable hands. Okay? Thank you for being here to listen to this, Ann. I'll go here, Don, and then back.
Well, taking his statement a step further that he just gave us, I have a slight reaction to that, in that how far do they get to go in determining whether or not those who worked to bring forth the request to be dismissed did their job? How much leeway would there be in allowing them to challenge, I'll use that word, the team that came from the church as to how they got to the point that they did, and how thorough were they? A simple question, a couple answers, or we want to meet with others to get a feel from your, how far does that go? If it happens.
May I have a shot at
Yeah.
My answer to that would be, the presbytery approved a policy. That policy includes something like 13 steps. And were I sitting on a jury somewhere, okay, I would say if you skip steps 1 to 12, step 13 is immaterial. So I think that going back to essentially step 1, validating that step 1 was in fact done. Not doing it again necessarily, but validating that it was, and on through to the end.
Just a second. Let me reflect for you a second. With the 11 churches that are in the process at this point, I don't know, there may be more later, but probably 75% of those, it is pretty clear that there is such a substantial majority who want dismissal that it's not going to be, the issues and hypotheticals that we're discussing are really not going to be applicable in those congregations. It's 3 or 4 that for whom this will become a real. It will no longer be hypothetical, all right? And the issues are going to service and be dealt with. One of the other issues that a discernment team is going to have to look at is what was the information that was presented to the congregation as part of the discernment process? Did the congregation only hear one side of the story? Or was there an opportunity for contrasting viewpoints to be heard by the whole congregation? That's one of the things that discernment team's probably going to be asking. Who presented the side for staying in the PCUSA? Who presented the side that says, these are the really valuable assets that we get out of this denomination? If that wasn't taking place, then the discernment team has got to decide, gee, how do we make that happen, or should we make it happen? Is it relevant in this situation? All right? Question? Oh, I hear somebody hasn't asked a question yet.
It seems to me that you have a kind of political problem here, though. If session makes these decisions, and sessions are the only ones who can make these decisions, now is the presbytery going to go around session to find out what the congregation really knew and when they knew it?
In this case, they can, yes.
That's in the plan.
That's Presbytery always has that right. All right. And I say that as somebody who's done committee on ministry work for the last 25, 30 years. There are provisions in the form of government that allow the presbytery to go around sessions if I think the language is unable or unwilling to fulfill their role as a session. All right?
Just the other side of the coin, granted that a session shouldn't just write a letter and automatically assume they can go direct to the negotiations of step 13 as it was indicated. On the other hand, the discernment team shouldn't presume that you have to start at step 1, especially for the congregations that have extremely large majorities in favor of leaving and have been in discernment for 2 years or more and have gone through a lot of these steps. So I think that there has to be a lot of judgment used on the part of the team, and I'm perfectly happy.
There are several of the congregations already have 10 of those steps taken care of. I know at least 1 or 2 that have all the financial data. If it isn't already in place, it will be very shortly. They've done all of their homework. They are ready. Okay, they're ready to enter. Let's have conversations. Here's what you've asked for or are asking for. Now we're ready to begin real conversations. Okay, so it's, a lot of other ones are, we don't know. We just want to leave. All right. Well, there are a couple of them I know are like that. So, other questions? Yes.
Keith, describe what you would understand in terms of Presbyterian discernment, in terms of the session's role in that and the congregation's role. Michael Hagan has talked about congregational assumptions, and it seems to me that there could be congregational assumptions regarding discernment also. So, how would you describe the role of session, its responsibility to congregations? And these are sessions that take all this very seriously. How do you describe that?
Boy. The best document I have on how Presbyterians go about discernment was written for the Peace, Unity, and Purity people. The study guide written by former EP in Cleveland, Vicky Custis, C-U-S-T-I-S. Vicky led the Peace, Unity, and Purity through their discernment process for 3 years. Out of that, she's written like a 20 or 30 page manual on how to use discernment as a decision-making process. It is the best single document I've come across for helping Presbyterians understand what we mean by discernment. All right? And has a whole series of trainings from the Mennonite Peace Center and how they go about mediation and discernment. That's a different way to it. It is, my guess is that there are probably going to be as many answers as there are people in the room. All right? And like I said, unfortunately, we are working without a manual. As I said, there are 170 different processes of how we go about discerning how to do this in a Christian manner that is indeed a gracious, fair, and equitable process for everybody involved. And you're going to make mistakes. I said we, but I'm going to be up north, so I will not. I'm the only one who won't make any mistakes in this process, folks. You'll make them, and it'll happen. That's part of life. We are humans. Jesus Christ did not come to save the perfect. Yeah.
Well, can I just make a follow-up?
Yeah.
Because the tone in this room, it's not, quote, a friendly crowd to necessarily a pastor like me. Who's,
Okay.
And a lot of our people are here. A lot of heads shaking and smirking and, oh yeah, that's what they did. I just got to tell you that nobody tried to do this in bad faith. Speaking for me and every pastor I know, nobody undertook this lightly. Nobody made a decision and say, let's stick it to the people. So I just want to say, those who talk about fairness and graciousness should model it. And if we as a presbytery, I was in the heart of this thing, 4 ways of one, with an arrow through it. We weren't given a lot of direction. Nobody pointed me to this manual. Now our people will go and read that manual and say, here's what you did wrong. And I'll say, I didn't know this. I thought we were playing soccer. Now you want rugby rules. So I think there has to be an awful lot of, well, grace and there is a win-lose here. That's the problem. I mean, there is a fourth choice, to use Todd Bolsinger's things he said. So it's just hard. So somebody has to speak that into this room, I
Okay.
feel like, and I'm fine with having to do it. I wish I didn't. But my understanding of discernment, some people have assumptions that were never articulated by anyone, and yet we failed those assumptions. So I hope as these discernment team work, they would say, well, what were your assumptions, and what was your role, and why did you pursue this way? And given that framework, how did you engage with your people, and all of that? So I don't know what you can say to that from your,
A reminder to everybody, one of the things that probably drives pastors crazy fastest is for somebody to come up on Sunday morning and just sort of give you the cold shoulder and walk off, and you call them, they won't answer. And so you ask elders to check in. Well, you didn't visit me in the hospital, Pastor. Well, nobody told me you were in the hospital. Okay? Somebody's got to tell the presbytery and the session and the pastor that there are some folk in the hospital who need some visits and attention. If you don't say anything, then you can't expect them to read minds. Is that fair enough, Doug?
Well, yeah, but also not even now at this point, because we do know. I mean, we've heard they're in the hospital or whatever you want to tell them. But it was beforehand, like we were supposed to know that they were going to get cancer 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. I mean, being held to an expectation that no one had articulated.
Right. And may not. Yeah, it's going to take a while to get those articulated. Fair enough. Okay.
As a stated clerk, clerk of session, I recall that the letter said, be patient, but the training is available to those who've been elected by the presbytery, as well as those who might be members of a team at the church. So everybody has a shot at that same training.
Right. Is that going to hold true, Mr. Stated Clerk?
Yeah, if I heard the word had, I want to change it to will be, because the training hasn't happened yet. But we very much eagerly want for the Presbytery delegates and for the congregational delegates to be a part of hearing the same, this is what we're trying to accomplish together.
At this point, I'm unaware of the presbytery saying that to the congregations. There is no message that I know my pastor has received that says your team is welcome at the presbytery for that training.
That was stated to the last two presbytery meetings.
And it went to the stated clerk, and to the clerk of session and to the senior pastor.
We had session last week and it was not even mentioned.
I will give consideration to your having said that. Thank you for,
Yeah.
because it's true, what gets sent out in one manner doesn't necessarily always get heard where it needs to, so thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just want to say that
Sure.
it's very easy to find that discernment, what you mentioned. If you just type in her name and the word discernment, and the PDF comes up, and you have access to it on the web.
Do you hear that, folks? If you want to get,
So it's free.
it's free. Vicky Custis, Custis, and you do a comma, discernment.
I just put the word discernment in it.
Okay, Vicky Custis, discernment, and the PDF will come up, and you may copy it down. Okay, it's the other nice thing is it's got a lot of tools.
And it's actually Curtis, C-U-R-T-I-S.
I said, oh, it's Curtis. Okay,
Two S's.
two S's. Sorry about that. Curtis. Victoria, but she goes by Vicky.
Right, it's Victoria Curtis, but if you put in that, her name and
Okay.
discernment, it comes up.
And it's got, hopefully going forward, it's got a lot of tools you can use in sessions, in meetings with groups, as well as, most importantly, is the why we do this. It was created primarily as an alternative to Robert's Rules. The Robert's Rules is clearly an adversarial type context way of doing decisions. It's a majority, minority, bingo. Discernment is much more looking for how do we move towards finding some kind of consensus that we can all live with. We may not all be happy with it, but we can all live with it. All right? What?
Just one more last comment. I'm on council, and also at the last Presbyterian meeting that you all nominated me to be part of this process. And as a pastor, certainly my goal in all of this is being part of that is that pastoral concerns in this whole process are huge. And that really ought to be our focus. That we really need to care for one another in this process, even though it may mean that we are separated.
And that includes the purpose of this, those members who want to stay in the Presbyterian Church USA and may not go with a congregation that is dismissed. All right? Thank you all very much.